Hello, it's Thursday, January 16th. I'm going to the office today, which is unusual because it's a Thursday. But I got to presentate real soon. It's a pretty big presentation for me, so I'm going to get there. We're going to go through a comment from YouTube. The question is, when you interview senior software engineers for hiring, how important is it that they know frameworks and popular libraries versus core fundamentals, such as algorithms, data structures, and LeetCode stuff? If you know me, this is going to be a bit of a loaded question, but let's get into it. I think it's going to be kind of fun to answer. It only looks like it's because it's early, it's like 5:30 in the morning and I'm driving to the office. But I think it'll be interesting, but it's going to be quick-ish, hopefully, to get to the office. Usually it's not. Usually Google Maps is like, you're screwed. So we should be good. But if you want your questions answered, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, look for Dev Leader on social media. That's my main YouTube channel where I have edited tutorials and also videos on software engineering topics like this one. But they are edited. They're more succinct. They're more concise. If you like that kind of format, you may prefer that channel. This channel will be very much stream of consciousness. I'm going to be probably yelling at bad drivers and stuff because they suck. But yeah, it's just a completely different format, but similar topics. So with that said, hiring senior software engineers, probably the way I answer this is going to be similar for non-seniors too. But I mean, let's say like mid-level senior, just to kind of bucket it all together. I'm going to start things off by addressing the elephant in the room that you may have picked up on when I was reading out the question, but I do not group LeetCode into this at all. Oh, it's weird. The crosswalk was flashing, but there's literally no humans anywhere. Maybe they already disappeared. But I don't group LeetCode into this because I think LeetCode, pardon my language, is bullshit. I think it can be a great tool if you find that it's like a good for you getting some mental gymnastics and practice, and it's a green light. Holy, what are you doing? This person got to the green light and stopped. It's not how that works. LeetCode, like I look at LeetCode almost, I don't want to compare it to like doing Sudoku problems. But when we're talking about LeetCode, I don't like it because I don't think it represents the overwhelming majority of what we're doing in software development. That is not to say that there is zero value. That is not to say that you can't, enjoy doing it and feel like you're, practicing and problem solving more effectively. I think it absolutely is a tool that you can use if you want to improve your problem solving skills. However, I don't think that it is the best use of time spent if you want to be a better software developer. And as a result, it is not something at all that I use when hiring. And this is where my bias comes in, because someone will say, hey, Nick, well, what about all the job interviews that are out there where people are getting asked LeetCode questions? You are 100% correct. I will always tell people, unless this changes at some point in my career, that if you are hiring or if you're applying to places, you're hiring software engineers, that the likelihood of you being asked a LeetCode style coding question is probably high. But I think that that's unfortunate because I don't agree with it as a mechanism to gauge someone's abilities. The reason for this, if I just want to spend a moment on this, is that, so a lot of places will leverage their software engineering staff to conduct the coding interviews. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think in practice, though, there's a bit of a challenge, and this is from my experience of like 12 years of hiring software engineers. The challenge ends up being that if you have people that are brought in to do interviews, you're kind of crowdsourcing the interview process, right? And I think it makes sense. You're using software engineers who are skilled in the space to kind of conduct the interview. But what ends up happening is that when people aren't on the same page for what we care about when interviewing, which, by the way, is actually a very difficult thing to do. You would think that it should be more straightforward, but people have their own opinions about what's valuable. And this is like me saying out loud, I don't think LeetCode is valuable. Some people do think that it's valuable, and they think that way because that's what they were asked, or because they don't know of better questions to ask. But one of the things that I've seen happen time and time again is that LeetCode questions typically have some type of like trick in them, or there's an optimization opportunity. And not all of them, but a lot of them have this kind of format where if you were asked a LeetCode style question, you could probably answer it in like a naive way where it might not be the most performant and you could make it work. And then if you knew about some trick, you could cut the runtime or like the memory usage into like, by like orders of magnitude. And like, that's the question is like, that's how you answer it, is finding like this secret. And I think from my experience working with software engineers, going through these, like you have like an interview panel kind of going through the results, is that I've seen far too many times people go, oh yeah, like no, that person didn't do well on the coding question. And when we dig into it, they end up saying it's because they like didn't find the trick optimization. And in my head, I'm like, what are you interviewing for? How good they are at finding tricks, or how good they are at building software? Because those are very different things. And some people will argue, well, no, they're the same because in real software, we have to look for all these types of optimizations. And like, sure, but it's not like at some point you need working software and you can optimize it later. So anyway, I think that in practice, asking LeetCode style questions is just a terrible way of gauging someone's ability to build software. Sorry, you got to merge some lanes here. Okay, so with that out of the way, because I don't want to rant about LeetCode the entire drive, the rest of the question is, I think, really focused around fundamentals and like tech stacks and languages. And the answer is really, for me at least, primarily on fundamentals, but I don't think I gauge them necessarily as explicitly that way. When people are like, oh, data structures and algorithms, I'm not going to go test people that they've memorized data structures and algorithms. It's even more like fundamental than that for me. And it's like your ability to like navigate problems and communicate, right? So when I ask questions, I'm not like, okay, like here we go. Do you have like the A-star algorithm or whatever memorized and like you can recite it to me? Because if you were presented a problem on the job, my expectation is not that you have a bank of like algorithms memorized. But I think familiarity and exploring the problem space is important. And the reality is that like you have all sorts of resources when you're building software. So if you knew that you were dealing with like a graph problem and you knew that you needed to like traverse things, and then you could say like, we want to do things a particular way or look for optimizations around this because of these reasons. Like I'm more interested in how you're thinking through it, because like I was saying, you're building software, you're going to have tools, you're also going to have a team around you. And like, I don't feel, kind of like with the LeetCode situation, I don't feel that you need to have the things memorized. So unfortunately, one of the things that can happen, and it's very common in interviews, is that say you had a question that was like a coding question you were asking someone, and the requirement was basically that you needed to know like an A-star algorithm, right, for traversing. And you ask this question and the candidate's like, basically they blank on the exact steps in the algorithm. What I don't want to have happen is that this person fumbles the entire question, even though they knew, like, if this were real life, they were like, oh man, I would want to go use A star. I would want to use some traversal algorithm, or if we're not talking about graphs, we're talking about something else. Like they kind of know there's an existing tool and they can get the gist of it, but they can't remember like a step or something like that. I don't want them to bomb the whole question. And like personally, even if I were asking a question like this, I wouldn't like fail someone outright if they like were navigating this question and then like happened to slip up on part of it and then got stuck. What I would try to do at that point is like ask them like, hey, so talk to me about what you're trying to do here. Like, tell me how you know you're stuck, like that you're forgetting a step or whatever it happens to be. And then tell me about what it's trying to accomplish. Because to me, it's about the understanding of these things, right? I want to see how you think through problems, and I want you to communicate that thought process to me. One of the other really kind of weird things that I've seen surfacing, and I shouldn't say weird, that's not fair, something that I don't like fully agree with, but I can understand. This person, no lights? Yeah, another idiot with no lights. Actually, they do have lights on. They don't have any lights on the back of their car. Amazing. I've heard people say, and let me kind of, I want to back up because I didn't want to sort of make fun of it. It's not really fair. I've heard people saying, hey, coding interviews are dumb because, and if you expect me to like debug and explain my problem solving out loud while I'm doing it, like that's not how I work and that's not real, and like no, like I refuse to participate because like that's just not how I work. And like part of me is like, okay, like I can get that maybe for you to go solve things you need some like time to think through, but at the same time, like I'm trying, like the scenario that I'm generally trying to put in front of people in an interview is almost like, look, you're the one responsible for solving it, but let's imagine that we're on a team working together and you're leading the charge on solving this problem, right? It's not about the specific code and the syntax. I want you to talk to me like we're going to be working on a team together. And basically, if you are outright telling me that I cannot problem solve in a conversation, then I would say that's probably going to be a weird team dynamic, because sure, you're going to be off on your own building stuff on some projects, but some of the really key critical discussions and conversations in software engineering happen when we're working together. Just a very brief example, one of my principal engineers on my team, it's happened almost like coincidentally in a couple of one-on-ones recently where we've been talking through something and then something comes up where we're talking about one of the designs that's ongoing, and we kind of touch on a detail, and then we go down like this little bit of a rabbit hole where we're talking about the algorithm, and then we start to like we're both learning different things, and we're like, oh wait, like maybe we should go approach things that way, or maybe we don't have to do this thing altogether. But if we were unable to have this conversation and discuss the problem solving through this algorithm, we would never arrive at these things. So like that is a key thing that I'm looking for personally. So when we talk about like, do I care? This is, again, all of this is like my perspective, my opinion. It's hard to give this as advice to other people. Like, hey, you don't have to worry about this, because odds are you're going to run into someone interviewing you that does really give a shit about these specific things. It's just not me, because I don't think that those translate into the software engineers that I want on my teams. And that's not to, let me back up. That's not to say that if you know those things like off the top of your head and you can do that you're not going to fit on the team or you're not going to be a good software engineer. You might be great. You might be amazing. I'm just saying that I'm not trying to gauge that as a requirement. Hopefully that's more clear. Okay, so the point around data structures, I hope that's more clear now. It's like, I want you, and sorry, data structures and algorithms, DSA. I don't think that I need to get people to like recite these things and prove that they know them off the top of their head. This is another thing that can be basically memorized, and my goal is that you understand how to navigate problems like this and not that you have something memorized. I would say the reality is that for senior software engineers, it's likely that they have like come across a lot of these things, right? And so if someone was like, well, okay, should I have to go learn these things? The reality is, if you've seen a lot of code, you probably have come across, whether it's graph traversal stuff or other types of algorithms, you probably have come across a whole variety of these things. So yes, it would be good for you to be exposed to these things, for you to build software that leverages them, to have an understanding of them. So I'm not trying to say that like, no, there's no value. You probably do need to experience things like this to build on that ability to problem solve and navigate things like that. But my point is that it's more about understanding the idea behind those versus just like regurgitating them to me. Because I don't need you to regurgitate exactly what it is, because we could just look it up on the internet. We could ask ChatGPT. Like, that's not proving to me the valuable skill. The valuable skill as a senior to me is going to be that you understand how to go approach these things. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of elaborate on that. So the answer very quickly on data structures and algorithms is like, yes, I think you need to understand them. No, I don't need you to recite them to me. We went over the LeetCode part. I don't ask LeetCode questions. And then I think the other sort of aspect to this was like frameworks and languages. And it's going to be similar to what I was saying for data structures and algorithms. There's a kind of like a overarching theme to how I interview. And that's like, when I sit down and interview people, so like right now I work at Microsoft, and C# is one of the primary languages we use on our team. By the way, we do use C++, we do use Rust, but C# is the main one on our team. Most teams in my space are using C#. But when I interview people and we go through a coding question, when I pull up the tool, I can't even remember what tool we use for doing coding interviews. The first thing I say is pick any language you want. It's the very first thing I say to them, pick any language you want, because the reality is we're going to be able to ramp you up in C#. Because if you know some other language, I'm pretty confident we can ramp you up in C#. And fortunately, because we're Microsoft, we're a big company, there's a bit of a sort of wiggle room in getting people ramped up on this stuff. I've talked about this in a few videos now, and I want to say it again. What I'm telling you is, oh man, there's not a lot of space to merge there, but okay, if you insist. What I'm telling you is from my experience and how I navigate things. There are absolutely situations, like I worked at a startup before Microsoft for 8 years. I mean, it wasn't a startup by the end of it, but in startup land, you don't have such a luxury on ramping people up. Like, you need really quick learners, like super quick, if they're going to come in and not know a language that you use. So it's not that you can't hire people that don't know the language or the tech stack, but if you are a startup, and I feel like some people don't think about or recognize, like, a startup is a business that's trying to get going. Many startups don't even make money yet, right? Many of them have like some type of investment. They're trying to get to a point where they have customers. Sometimes they have customers already. Maybe they don't even have investment, and they're just trying to like scale up. And there's a ton of pressure on the business to try and even remain in existence. And I think some people are like, well, it's a company, so like, therefore, shouldn't have to worry about these things, and like that's the company's problem, not my problem. And like that kind of attitude in a startup is like not like the people who run the startup, they don't want to tolerate that kind of thinking. Because a startup will probably not survive if it's filled with people like that. It's just the reality. It's going to be very difficult. It's already going to be difficult to make it succeed. So having people that are kind of like company problem, not mine, it's going to make it challenging. So if you consider what I'm saying, what I'm trying to get at is that startups don't really have such a luxury to spend a lot of time ramping people up, because if it's going to take, month to multiple months of ramping up and that person's not actually productive, that's multiple months of salary being paid out by a company that may not be in a good position to be spending money for not having productivity. And yes, at some point, there's going to be this weird growth pain phase where it's like, we got to do it, and like we got to try and suck it up and hope it works. But like you have to understand that can be a very big risk for companies, okay? So it's not that companies should never do that. I got to move lanes. Come on, buddy. It's just that it's very challenging for some startups, given their financial situation. And if you don't like that idea, that's totally cool. Maybe that's not the right startup for you. Just something to consider. So for me, especially at Microsoft, it's like, I don't care if you know C# or not. You will likely be able to learn it pretty quick. So all these people tailgating me today and yesterday. Especially in like areas where like it doesn't make a lot of sense. We're on a ramp right now. Off ramp, it's about to turn into an on ramp. You don't got a lot of space to be tailgating me. And it's not going to get you very far. Give me 1 sec. I just want to merge lanes here because it's a bit of a blind spot. Okay. So with my teams currently, like I said, we have that bit of wiggle room to be able to make sure that people can learn languages. Even when I was at Magnet Forensics before, like knowing C# is helpful, but like we had a lot of interns coming through on my teams, and we had a pretty good like mentorship culture in general at Magnet Forensics at the time. I can't speak on I've been there for 5 years. I'm hoping it's still great. That was something that we always really wanted to build up. But on my teams, I had interns basically around the clock for 8 years, almost consistently, every single part of the year, not just summer. So always had interns, and that means there's going to be people that maybe haven't even touched C# before, and that's okay. And they're very junior, and we got to get them ramped up anyway. But that's the thought process going into it. So in my opinion, if you knew like an object-oriented language and you understood some concepts, we'll get you there. So we would just spend a lot of time mentoring and really believed in that. You won't find that everywhere, which is unfortunate, but I'm trying to say this because I'm acknowledging like it's very doable. And in my opinion, knowing one particular language and then trying to gauge engineers just on whether they know or not they know that language, I feel like is a huge misstep and a huge missed opportunity. But like I said, for some startups, that could be make or break for them. On the tech stack thing, similar type of argument. Again, you might have situations where startups are trying to bring people in that know a tech stack to help like kind of beef up how effective the team can be by leveraging that tech stack. And if there's not familiarity, they're like, okay, so we bring on a person and they're not going to, very quickly help get us results because they have to go learn this. Like that's probably going to feel kind of crappy for them. Again, I'm not saying like that I encourage startups to do this. I'm just trying to acknowledge, trying to give you some different perspective on this, that they might be like, man, that's going to put ourselves in a bad spot. Not because they don't think that you're capable at some point, but they're like, we might not reach some point if we do this. Just something to think about. But for us, like at Microsoft, again, same thing, at least on my teams. I don't care what tech stacks you know. But the meta point that I was trying to mention from the previous part about data structures and algorithms is kind of similar. And that's, you probably would not be at the senior level if you hadn't used some programming languages, at least one, and some types of tech stacks. Like probably not. It's entirely possible, but the reality is, like, if you say you knew one programming language, which is fine. Like for me, I know C# very well. I know other programming languages, but I don't actively use any other programming language. Not because I'm incapable of ever using it. It's just that if I have to go build something, I'll just use C# and do it. So at least one language. But if you knew zero, like if you never used something off of the shelf to go build things, that's probably going to be a little weird, because the reality is you should probably not be building everything from scratch. So you probably need to have some exposure to tech stacks. But like, again, are you an expert in one, and we're hoping that it better be that one that we use, and that's the only way that you're going to get hired? Like, no, absolutely not. It's like, in my opinion, if you're using tech stacks, again, startups would be like, we want you to be familiar with it so you can be effective quickly. And otherwise, for me, it's about understanding, like, what is this tech stack? Like, what capabilities is it giving you? Why is that a valuable thing? Because that will help allow you to make decisions about, is this the right tech stack to use? Because we're going to be building software. If we have to go build something new, are you just going to say, yep, they hired me for this one tech stack, we must always use this? Because maybe it's not the right tool for the job. And if all you know is the one tech stack, and that's what we hired you for, and that's all you ever care about, are you going to actually learn other things or apply different ways of thinking? Man, it's sweet. One person's here. What a nerd. Who gets to the office at 6 a.m, nerd? Me. Yeah, but I think it's probably my take on all that stuff. So I hope that's helpful for some perspective. I gotta, re-add the caveat, like, this is how I approach stuff. The question was to me, so I assume they want my specific opinion. But the reality is, like, I don't want you to hear this and say, oh, well, everyone who's hiring will always do it this way, because no, they won't. So if you want my general perspective on this, my perspective for what probably others in terms of hiring would do, I was trying to sprinkle that in terms of saying, like, you may have this kind of experience at startups where they do want a specific tech stack or a specific language. I find at bigger companies, you have probably goes in two different directions. One is that they're just like, whatever, we're going to tell you what we use. And if you have some familiarity with something else, like, cool, like, good, great, you'll figure it out, we'll be fine. And we can use that, period of time for you ramping up to be less effective because we know that you'll get there, no problem. Or you have the exact opposite, where they're like, we have a very, very specific role that we're trying to hire for, and, like, we need you. And to give you I don't have a specific example, like, we didn't just do this in Microsoft, like, for my teams, but I could see this being something that we may have wanted. And in terms of building Rust expertise, I could imagine that they would put a specific, they might have, like, at not like an immediate level, like on my team necessarily, but I could see that if there's a couple of spots where there's, like, an interest in building with Rust, if they were like, hey, look, we want to hire in people that are really good at Rust specifically. And that's like a strategic type of thing to say, like, Sure, yes, we have people, and I have people on my team that were learning Rust all of last year, and they became very effective at using Rust. Great, it's awesome. But like, they may have in different spots put up job descriptions that were like, we want to hire for Rust specifically, and that way we can bring in expertise into a team and then help the people that are learning ramp up even faster because they have someone that's kind of an expert in language in this case, or maybe it's a tech stack in other cases. So it's not that the very specific roles can't exist, but in general, for me hiring, it's almost always like general software engineers. So I hope that helps. Again, reminder, if you want your questions answered, put them in the comments below. If you have specific scenarios or you want it to be kept anonymous, just look for Dev Leader on social media. Send me a message there. And a friendly reminder that I have my main channel, Dev Leader, which is where all of my edited videos are. If you made it to the end of this and you're like, I hate this format, then Dev Leader is probably a better channel for you to check out because it's similar topics. But on that, I have a live stream that's at 7 p.m. Pacific every Monday, unless, like, this Monday's a holiday coming up, but I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be streaming. And we go through topics that are similar to what's on this vlog. So it'll be about software engineering. If you want to know generally what the topic's going to be, I put out a newsletter every Saturday. It's called Dev Leader Weekly. You can find it at weekly.devleader.ca. Yes, CA, because I'm Canadian and I got a Canadian domain in 2013. You don't have to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're like, newsletters are dumb, I don't want stuff in my email, like every creator's doing that, you don't have to subscribe to it. That's fine. I'm just letting you know the topic will be presented there. So you can go there on a Saturday, Sunday, or even Monday and go check out what the topic is. And that way, if you're like, hey, this seemed interesting, I might want to tune into the live stream, then you can. Or you might read it and say, that sounds dumb. I don't want to be on like part of the live stream for that. That's cool too. But that's where the topic's going to be if you want to check it out. It's weekly.devleader.ca. And I think that's it. So I hope that helps. Thanks again, and I will see you next time. Take care.